Hey guys, welcome to the video. My name's Josh, and today I wanted to share with you my first impressions of Diablo 4. I had a chance to play the closed beta test this past weekend, and honestly it was a lot of fun. Now I do want to first preface this with my experience in the ARPG genre. I'm not a massive ARPG guy, but I've enjoyed them fairly casually. The main ones that I've played previously are all of the Diablo games, in particular Diablo 3. I played that a lot when it first came out. I've also tried Path of Exile, which was, in my opinion, a pretty fun game, but fairly complex, so it's not necessarily for me, but I think I'll give it another go once Path of Exile 2 comes out. And I also played a little bit of Lost Ark for about 2 weeks before Elden Ring came out, but I did enjoy that game for the most part. So I'm a fairly casual ARPG enjoyer. Alright, now right off the bat, I can say with a fair amount of confidence that if you enjoyed Diablo 3, you'll most likely also enjoy Diablo 4. The moment-to-moment combat gameplay plays very similarly to how Diablo 3 played. It's smooth, it's responsive, and outside of one ability on the Barbarian, I didn't notice any jankiness. I also like how the skill system is put together. It seems to be a nice middle ground between a very complex system like you'd find in Path of Exile, and what I consider to be a fairly streamlined or simplistic skill system like in Diablo 3. Basically, as you level up, you'll receive skill points, which you can then invest into your skill tree. Initially, you're only going to be able to choose from a basic skill in the first segment of the skill tree, but as you spend more points, you'll gain access to new segments, which come with more abilities and passives the further down you go. Prior to level 15, you can respec your skill tree for free, and even after level 15, it only costs a small amount of gold to respec, so you don't need to lock yourself into a specific build, and it seems like experimenting with your skill tree is encouraged since it's a fairly forgiving and flexible system. As for itemization, it seems to be all about finding legendary orange items which have special properties on them that trigger under certain conditions, and then either using them outright if they're an upgrade, or extracting that property from the item, which will destroy the legendary item, but that property can then be applied to a rare yellow item. For me, this seems like a fun and rewarding gameplay loop. However, I did notice the drop rates for legendary items from bosses seemed decently high. I played fairly casually over the weekend, but by the time I hit the beta level cap of 25, I was almost fully kitted out with legendary items. I don't know if this was by design or if the drop rates were simply increased during the beta, and while I do like this aspect of the game since it lets you experiment with builds early on, we'll have to wait and see what they do with the unique items and item sets, since if what we've seen in the beta is all that we have for itemization, then I'd be a little bit concerned about the longevity of the game. I also want to touch on the content aspect of the game. From the beta, I only had access to Act 1, but I think this will apply to the other acts as well. So the content in the beta was made up of the main story quest, the side quests, dungeons, open world events including the world boss, and general exploration. I think this is fine for the leveling experience, but I really hope there is something more planned for the end game, and particularly the seasonal content, since most players are just going to get burnt out really quickly if all there is to do at the end game is run dungeons. Now, Diablo 4 isn't just an ARPG, it is an MMO ARPG, since you can find and interact with other players both in and outside of town, but from the beta, the gameplay interactions with other players only happened during random events, and dungeons only involved other players if you were in a party with them. This might be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I actually hope Blizzard steers a bit into the MMO aspect of the game. I think it would be a lot of fun to have a group finder for dungeons. That way you have the option to either run dungeons by yourself or with a small group of other players. I also think adding large-scale raid content with some challenging mechanics would be really cool. I know Blizzard has the potential to do something like this very well, since they've been doing it for over a decade with World of Warcraft. I also want to quickly touch on the graphics, art direction, and sound for the game. Firstly, the graphics, they look good, and for me it ran very well on my 3070. I didn't encounter any noticeable frame rate or graphical issues, and while this isn't a massive leap in graphics like what we saw from Diablo 2 to 3, it is still an overall improvement over 3, and really it does what it needs to do. Now, the art direction is remarkable in my opinion. They've done a really great job conveying this dark and gritty atmosphere throughout the first act, and I really hope it keeps a similar vibe in the other areas and acts in the game. It feels much closer in tone to Diablo 2 than Diablo 3, and at least for me, that's a very good thing. As for sound, music and voice, they've also done an excellent job on this. In particular, the music and ambient sound from the main city of Act 1, it really added this bleak and downtrodden feel, but I'll let the music speak for itself. The voice acting was also very solid, even for the side quests. There was never a moment where I heard a voice that just felt very out of place and took me out of the game.
Since she collapsed in my arms while telling me what happened to my Vosek.
Thank you. Before we leave, we should ask around town. Maybe he came back on his own.
I see. So our young brother failed in his pilgrimage to the monastery. A shame. But no worse than any of us have earned, is it?
I mostly played the Barbarian during the beta, and the sound really added to the impact of the attacks.
Not ready yet.
Lastly, I do want to touch on two things that you may want to keep in mind with this game. The game is on the pricier side of things. Where I am, it costs $110 Australian for the standard edition. Normally you wouldn't pay more than $90 for a PC game. For my American audience, I believe it's going to cost $70 American, so if price is a factor for you, this may be something to keep in mind. And the last thing to keep in mind is that since it's an always online game, I can almost guarantee that the first few days, or possibly even the first week of the game, is going to have queue times and connection issues. Unfortunately, this is pretty much to be expected, since it's happened with almost every major Blizzard release. Okay, so to reiterate, if you like Diablo 3, chances are you'll enjoy this game as well. It's not going to be the PoE killer or anything like that, but it might be a good alternative for anyone that was turned off by the complexity and depth of PoE. In any case, I always think it's best for people to come to their own conclusions, and since Diablo 4 is having an open beta this weekend, I would suggest giving it a try yourself if it sounds like something you're interested in. Just keep in mind, the queue times are probably going to be pretty brutal. Anyway, that covers my first impressions of the Diablo 4 beta. If you had a chance to play the closed beta yourself, let me know what you thought of the game in the comments below. I'm going to now leave you with footage of me getting my shit absolutely kicked in by the world boss. Thanks for watching guys, and take it easy.
Don't have enough fury. Why are we still here?